I thought I was over her. Until I got the wedding invitation. Maya wanted me there not to reconcile, but to reveal a truth I never saw coming. So sit patiently and listen to today's story. The love we lost was only the beginning of a story of lies, greed, and betrayal. The invitation arrived on a Tuesday, a day so mundane that the heavy, cream-colored envelope felt like a brick through my mailbox. It was embossed with gold leaf. Maya and Julian. The names stared back at me, mocking the 3 years I had spent trying to erase them from my memory. We hadn't spoken in 2 years. Our breakup hadn't been an explosion. It was a slow leak. A gradual emptying of hope until there was nothing left but silence. Now, she wanted me to watch her say I do to a man who, according to social media, was everything I wasn't. Stable, wealthy, and certain. My friends told me not to go. It's a power move, Leo, Mark said, leaning over a beer. She wants you to see what you lost. But there was a note tucked inside my specific invitation, handwritten, No, I have no right to ask this. But please, I need you to be there. There is something you never knew. That was the hook. The truth she hinted at was a ghost I had been chasing since the day she packed her bags. I booked the flight to Vermont. The wedding was held at a private estate tucked in the Green Mountains. When I arrived at the rehearsal dinner, the air was thick with the scent of pine and expensive perfume. I saw her across the lawn. Maya looked ethereal, but as our eyes locked, I didn't see the triumph I expected. I saw fear. When Julian, her fiancé, put a hand on her waist, she flinched just a fraction of an inch, but I saw it. You came, she whispered, when we finally found a moment alone by the lake. You asked, I replied. Maya, what is this really about? The night before the wedding, I couldn't sleep. A soft knock at my cabin door revealed Maya, still in her silk robe, her eyes red from crying. I'm not marrying him because I love him, Leo, she sobbed. The truth came out like a flood. After we broke up, Maya's father had spent the family's entire savings on a failing business venture, pulling even more from investors who turned out to be dangerous people. Julian wasn't just a fiancé. He was the son of the man who held her father's debt. This wasn't a wedding. It was a merger. A sacrifice. Why tell me now? I asked, my heart hammering. Why invite me to watch this? Because, she breathed. The money Julian's father used to save us. It was stolen from your family's old estate accounts during the probate. After your father passed, Julian knew he used your inheritance to buy my hand in marriage. The room went cold. The truth wasn't just about her feelings, it was a web of white-collar crime and manipulation that had ruined both our lives before we even had a chance to save our relationship. The wedding day arrived. I stood in the back of the chapel. The truth was heavy in my pocket. I had spent the night calling old family lawyers, confirming the paper trail Maya had whispered about. As the priest asked if anyone had an objection, the silence was deafening. I didn't stand up and shout. I simply caught Maya's eye and nodded. She knew I had the proof. Instead of saying I do, Maya turned to Julian. The accounts are frozen, Julian. The police are at the gate. As Maya sat on the edge of the bed in my cabin, the weight of her words hung in the air. The truth wasn't just a romantic tragedy. It was a criminal conspiracy. My father's death, 2 years ago, had been messy. His estate tied up in probate for months. I had assumed the dwindling numbers in the trust were due to bad investments. I never realized Julian's father, a senior partner at the firm, had been siphoning it to fuel his own empire. He told me if I didn't marry Julian, he would leak the documents that framed my father for the embezzlement. Maya whispered. My father is innocent, Leo. He was a scapegoat. I knelt in front of her. Why didn't you tell me this back then? Because they threatened you too, she said, her voice trembling. They told me if I reached out to you, your accidental car debt would become an accidental tragedy. I had to leave you to keep you alive. I didn't sleep that night. I contacted Sarah, an old friend from law school who specialized in forensic accounting. Through encrypted messages, I sent her the account numbers Maya had memorized. By 4 a.m., my phone buzzed. Leo, it's worse than you thought. The money didn't just go to Maya's father's business. It was laundered through a series of offshore shells. But here's the kicker. The final signature on the transfer wasn't Julian's father. It was Julian himself. The man Maya was about to marry wasn't just a silver-spooned prick. He was a thief who had stolen my future to buy his bride. The sun rose over the Vermont mountains with a cruel beauty. The estate was buzzing with florists and caterers. I saw Julian on the veranda, sipping espresso, looking every bit the victor. I walked up to him. Leo, he said, his voice dripping with false sympathy. I'm glad you could make it. It's important to have closure, don't you think? Closure is a funny word, Julian, I replied, leaning against the railing. Sometimes it's a door closing. Sometimes it's a prison cell door locking. His smile didn't flicker, but his eyes grew cold. You always were a bit of a poet. Too bad poetry doesn't pay the bills. No, I whispered, stepping closer, but a forensic audit does. The ceremony was held in a glass conservatory. Maya looked like a ghost in white silk. Her father, looking aged and broken, led her down the aisle. As she passed my row, our eyes met. I gave her a nearly imperceptible nod. The trap was set. The priest began the rites. The air was heavy. When the moment came to speak, now or forever hold your peace, the room went silent. I didn't stand up. Instead, I pulled out my phone and hit send. On an email to every major investor sitting in that room. Simultaneously, the heavy oak doors at the back of the conservatory swung open. 2 men in dark suits entered. Not the police, not yet. They were the lead investigators. From the Internal Revenue Service and the State Auditor's Office. Julian's father stood up, his face flushing deep red. What is the meaning of this? The meaning, I said, finally standing up, is that the dowry for this wedding was paid for with stolen funds. From the Miller estate. My estate. Maya let go of Julian's arm as if his touch were toxic. She stepped away, moving toward the altar rail, away from the man who had bought her. You're bluffing, Julian hissed, though his hand was shaking. Check your phone, Julian, I said, and check the faces of your investors. The wedding never happened. The truth had been exposed in the most public way possible. Within an hour, Julian and his father were being questioned in a private study, and the guests were being ushered out in a whirlwind of scandal. I found Maya in the garden, the lace of her veil torn, sitting on a stone bench. The sun was setting, casting long orange shadows. It's over, she said, looking at her bare hands. It's just beginning, I replied. We have a lot of years to make up for. The truth was out. It wasn't just that she loved me. It was that she had sacrificed her happiness to protect me. And now, for the first time in years, the debt was paid. The days following the scandal were a blur of depositions and headlines. The billion-dollar bridegroom's fall, the papers screamed. Julian and his father were facing charges of grand larceny, wire fraud, and coercion. Maya moved into a small apartment in the city, refusing to take a dime from the remnants of her family's tarnished estate. She needed to be clean of it all. I stayed in a hotel nearby, my own inheritance finally being unfrozen. Though the money felt heavy, like it was stained with the time we had lost. One evening, 3 weeks after the wedding, I found her at a quiet diner. She looked exhausted, but for the first time, her eyes were clear. "I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop," she said, stirring her coffee. "I keep waiting for Julian to walk through the door and tell me it was all a test. He's behind bars, Maya. He can't reach you anymore. He reached into my soul for 2 years. Leo that doesn't just disappear because a judge signed a paper. While clearing out my father's old office, a place I hadn't visited since his funeral, I found a locked floor safe. Inside wasn't money. It was a stack of letters, all addressed to me, all in Maya's handwriting. They were dated from the months after our breakup. Julian's father had intercepted them. "Leo, if you're reading this, they told me you moved to London. They told me you hated me. But I'm writing anyway. I'm doing this because they said they'd destroy your father's reputation if I didn't stay away. I love you more than my own freedom." I realized then that the truth had layers I hadn't even touched. It wasn't just a financial crime. It was a psychological war. Against my better judgment, I visited Julian in the holding facility before his sentencing. He sat behind the glass, looking gaunt but still arrogant. "You think you won," Julian sneered. "You got the girl. You got the money back." "I didn't win, Julian. I just stopped losing," I replied. "Why did you do it? You had everything. Why steal my life?" Julian laughed, a dry, hollow sound. "Because you were happy. Leo, you had that effortless joy that people like me can't buy. I wanted to see if I could break it. I wanted to see if I could turn your true love into a transaction. And for 2 years, I did. I stood up. You failed. Because even when she was standing at the altar with you, she was looking for me." Months later, I took Maya back to Vermont. Not to the estate. That had been sold to pay off creditors. But to a small cabin near the lake where we had first met in college. The air was crisp. The drama of the courtrooms felt like a lifetime ago. We sat on the porch, watching the sunset bleed into the water. "I used to dream about this," Maya said softly. "But in the dream, I was always running, and you were always just out of reach." I took her hand. "I'm not going anywhere. We have 80,000 stories to tell each other, to fill in the gaps of those 2 years. Where do we start?" she asked. "We start at the beginning," I said. "Before the gold invitations, before the lies, just Leo and Maya." The truth had been a poison, but once it was out in the light, it became a catalyst. Leo used his recovered inheritance to start a foundation for victims of white-collar corruption, helping families who, like Maya's, had been bullied by the powerful. Maya returned to her passion for architecture, designing spaces that were open, transparent, and filled with light. The exact opposite of the dark rooms, where she had been held captive by her father's debts. They didn't get married right away. They didn't need a ceremony to prove they belonged together. They needed time. They needed the silence of a Tuesday morning without fear. The wedding invitation that started it all sat in a frame in Leo's office, a reminder that the truth might be painful, but it is the only thing that can truly set you free. While the world saw me as the pining ex-boyfriend, I had spent the 6 months prior to the wedding invitation becoming a ghost. I knew Julian was watching my main bank accounts, so I operated in the shadows. I had hired a team of private investigators, officers to track every wire transfer Julian made. The truth I uncovered was chilling. Julian wasn't just stealing my inheritance. He was using it to fund an illegal offshore gambling ring. The wedding wasn't just a merger. It was his clean exit. Once he married Maya, her family's Old money name would provide the perfect front for his laundered cash. I had to be surgical. If I moved too early, Julian would disappear. I had to wait for the moment he was most vulnerable, the vows. 2 days before the wedding, I had a secret meeting in a dimly lit parking garage in Burlington. The person I was meeting? Julian's own chief of staff, Marcus. He's paranoid, Leo, Marcus said, handing me a thumb drive. He treats everyone like a pawn. He's been skimming from his father to... If his father finds out, Julian has been stealing from the family firm to pay off his personal gambling debts. He'll disown him before the feds even arrive. This was the final piece of the puzzle. I didn't just have the evidence to put Julian in jail. I had the evidence to destroy his relationship with his only Elahi's father. Back in the present, after the wedding collapsed, I sat with Maya in the library of the estate. The police had cleared out, leaving a haunting silence. Leo, she said, looking at the thumb drive on the table. You didn't just come here to save me. You came here to burn his whole world down, didn't you? I came here to get back what was ours, I said. He didn't just take your freedom, Maya. He took my father's legacy. He took the money that was supposed to go to the children's hospital my dad supported. He turned my grief into his profit. We heard a commotion. Julian's father, Arthur, had been released on bail and had come back to the estate to retrieve his documents. He walked into the library, his face a mask of fury. You think you've won, boy? Arthur spat at me. I have lawyers who will have these charges dropped by morning. Maybe, I said calmly, sliding the laptop toward him. But your lawyers can't fix this. Look at folder B. Arthur looked at the screen. His eyes widened as he saw the records of Julian stealing. $50 million from Arthur's own private retirement fund money. Julian had lost on a bad bet in Macau. The betrayal on Arthur's face was more satisfying than any handcuffs. He realized his perfect son was the one who had truly ruined him. The next morning, I drove Maya away from that house for the last time. We stopped at a cliffside overlooking the Atlantic. The weight of the 90,000-word journey we had lived, the years of silence, the months of planning, the hours of fear seemed to lift with the morning mist. What now? She asked. Now, I said, we go back to the person you were before you met him, and I go back to the man I was before I lost you. We start fresh. No gold-rimmed invitations. No secrets. As we drove, Maya pulled a crumpled piece of paper from her pocket. It was the original note she had written to me, the one she was too afraid to send. Leo, if you ever find out the truth, don't come for me. Just be happy. That's the only way he loses. I reached over and took the paper, tearing it into small pieces and letting the wind take it out the window. He already lost, I said, because I didn't stay away. And you didn't give up. The city skyline looked different from the balcony of our new home. It wasn't a fortress like Julian's estate. It was a home built of glass and cedar, designed by Maya herself. In the 5 years since the wedding, that never was. The name, Leo Miller, was no longer associated with a tragic inheritance scandal, but with the Miller Rose Foundation. We had turned the stolen millions, once recovered, into a beacon for others. We didn't just give money. We provided legal shields for families being bullied by corporate Redditors. Maya stood beside me, her hair shorter now, her eyes sparkling with a peace I hadn't seen in our 20s. The gala is tonight, Leo. Are you ready? I'm ready for anything, as long as there are no gold leaf envelopes. I joked. She laughed, a sound that still felt like a victory every time I heard it. That afternoon, I received a letter from a maximum security prison. It was the first time Julian had reached out since his sentencing. I opened it, not with fear, but with curiosity. Leo, I heard about the foundation. I heard about the buildings Maya is designing. I spent 3 years blaming you for my fall. But sitting here, in a cell that costs nothing, I realized the truth. I never wanted Maya. I wanted to be you. I wanted to be the man someone would wait for. I destroyed myself, trying to steal a soul I could never understand. I didn't show the letter to Maya, not because I was keeping secrets, but because Julian no longer had the power to be a truth in our lives. He was just a footnote. I dropped the letter into the shredder. The gala was a celebration of the Foundation's 5th anniversary. The room was filled with people we had helped. Toward the end of the night, I took Maya to the center of the ballroom. The music slowed. I didn't have a grand speech. I didn't need a public spectacle. I leaned in and whispered in her ear. Maya, we've spent 5 years looking back at the truth of what happened. I want to spend the next 50 looking forward at the truth of what will be. I pulled a small, simple wooden box from my pocket. No gold, no diamonds, the size of ice cubes. Just a vintage band that had belonged to my grandmother. The only thing Julian's father hadn't been able to find in the estate. Will you marry me? For real this time? No debts, no threats, no audience. Maya didn't cry this time. She smiled. A bright, defiant, beautiful smile. I've been wearing the ring in my heart for years, Leo, yes. A month later, we stood on the same cliffside where we had watched the sunrise after the scandal. There were only 4 people there. Mark, Sarah, the accountant who helped save us, and the local justice of the peace. The truth was finally simple. It wasn't about bank accounts. It wasn't about revenge. It was about 2 people who refused to let the world turn them into cynics. As we exchanged vows, the wind carried our voices over the Atlantic. There was no one to object, no one to fear. The 90,000 words of our struggle had been written. The book was closed, and a new, blank page was waiting. As the sun set on our wedding day, I realized the ultimate truth. I had missed during all those months of plotting Julian's downfall. The best revenge wasn't seeing Julian in a cell. The best revenge wasn't getting the money back. The best revenge was happiness. Every day that Maya and I woke up and chose each other was a day that Julian lost all over again. We walked back to the car, hand in hand. The road ahead was long, winding, and completely ours. Epilogue, the archive. In the basement of our home, there is a single file cabinet. It contains the transcripts of the trial, the forensic audits, and the intercepted letters. Sometimes, on a quiet night, I look at it, not to dwell on the pain, but to remind myself that even the most complex lies eventually crumble under the weight of a single, persistent truth. While Leo and Maya built their new life, the people who helped them find the truth saw their own lives change forever. Sarah, the forensic accountant. After cracking the Julian case, Sarah became the most sought-after financial investigator in the country. She didn't go to a big Wall Street firm, though. She used the bonus Leo gave her to open Truth Seekers, Inc., a nonprofit that helps middle-class families fight back against predatory lenders. She kept a framed copy of the first check. Julian's father tried to bribe her with and signed and canceled. On her desk, as a reminder that integrity has no price. Mark, the loyal friend. Mark, who had spent years telling Leo to move on, finally understood why Leo couldn't. He became the chief operating officer of the Millerose Foundation. He was the one who ensured that every dollar recovered from the offshore accounts went directly into rebuilding the community centers Julian had nearly destroyed. The truth continued to haunt the villains. Arthur, Julian's father, didn't survive long in the world of the fallen. elite, disgraced, and penniless. He spent his final years in a small apartment, still clutching a briefcase full of worthless stock certificates. He never spoke to Julian again. Julian, however, became a cautionary tale. In prison, he started a program teaching other inmates about financial literacy, not out of the goodness of his heart, but as a way to pass the time. He had finally accepted that his power was an illusion. The man who tried to buy a wedding ended up with nothing but a library card and a bunk bed. The truth continued to haunt the villains. Arthur, Julian's father, didn't survive long in the world of the fallen. Elite, disgraced, and penniless. He spent his final years in a small apartment, still clutching a briefcase full of worthless stock certificates. He never spoke to Julian again. Julian, however, became a cautionary tale. In prison, he started a program teaching other inmates about financial literacy, not out of the goodness of his heart, but as a way to pass the time. He had finally accepted that his power was an illusion. The man who tried to buy a wedding ended up with nothing but a library card and a bunk bed. 10 years after the wedding invitation arrived, a new generation began to play in the gardens of the Miller home. Leo and Maya's daughter, Alina, and their son, Julian, named not after the villain, but as a reclaiming of a name that means youthful and bright, grew up in a house where there were no secrets. One day, Alina found an old, faded gold-rimmed envelope in a scrapbooking box. "What's this, Mommy?" she asked. Maya knelt down and took the envelope. She didn't look at it with sadness. She looked at it as the map that led her back to her soul. "That," Maya said, "is the most expensive mistake someone ever made, and the best thing that ever happened to us." The story of the wedding invitation wasn't just about an ex-girlfriend. It was a 90,000-word journey through the darkest parts of human greed and the brightest parts of human resilience. Leo sat in his study, looking at the Foundation's annual report. The $50 million that had been stolen was now worth over $200 million in social impact. The truth had been multiplied. He realized that if he had never received that invitation, he might have lived his whole life in a comfortable, quiet lie. The pain of that day was the fire that forged the man he became.